First, I'm going to make sure that my photon was set up correctly. So I have an empty game object I made called test connect, and I also have a script I made called test connect. Go ahead and create those two, and then drop your test connect script on the test connect game object. I have my test connect script open. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to tell Photon Network to connect to the server. So I'm going to do this under start. I'm going to do Photon Network. And you're going to notice it won't recognize this because I have to include the namespace to use. So I'm going to do control period on Visual Studio, which pops up options of what to use, and it should show using Photon Pun. So I click that, and you can see if I scroll up here, it added that to my namespaces. So now I'm going to type .connect using settings. And just to show you, you have a couple other options as well. So you have connect to best cloud server, which will automatically choose the best pinging server for the user. You have connect to master, where you can pass in the server address, the port, and the app ID. You have connect to region. There are different regions for like Asia, US West, etc. And of course, as we mentioned, connect using settings, which will use the settings that you have inside your server settings, which we looked at earlier. You will most likely use one of the other options later on, but just to get everything up and going, we're going to stick with connect using settings. We also have to enter the game version. So I did photonnetwork.game version equals 0.0.1 and then semicolon. The game version basically locks users to that version. So let's say you have game version 001 and you need to update your app to another version, but if users were on 001 and it would completely break things if they tried to play with users on 002, that's where you would change the game version, and Photon will block out the different game versions from interacting with each other. So now I need to know when I connect to the master. So I'm going to do public override void on connected to master. And you're going to see that you will receive an error because there's no known overrides for this. In my browser, I have the Photon Unity Networking 2 API open. You may also see I might have my old series open. I'm still actually using it to reference some notes to save me some time here and there. So I'm going to select callbacks because these are callbacks that I expect the server or API to give to me. I see iConnection callbacks. That sounds like something I want. So then I see the onConnected to master. Okay, so I already knew that's what it was called because I've done this before. But why you're not seeing that it's working, why you're getting that red text, is because we have to inherit from the correct class. So as you see up here, it says inherited by mono behavior pun callbacks. So I'm going to jump back over, and at the end of mono behavior, I'm going to type in pun callbacks. And just like that, it's recognized. Let me add in some debug print. Print connecting to server. And now add in connected to server under the on connected to master. I also want to know if the connection fails, so I'm going to go back to my API. I see void on disconnected, and it says called after disconnecting from the Photon server. It could be a failure or explicit disconnect call. The API or the documentation is going to be your best friend. If you are lost or confused, check out the API. So I'm going to go ahead and implement this now. So I'm going to do public override void on disconnected, and it's going to auto-populate. You also see there's a base.onDisconnected. This is essentially calling onDisconnected to the class that testConnect is inheriting from. So on mono behavior pun callbacks. So if I hit, or if I click over onDisconnected, and at least in Visual Studio, if I hit F12, it'll bring me over to that method, and I see there's nothing in there. Let me see if this inherits from anything. It doesn't. I don't know if it does, but it doesn't really matter. because the onDisconnected isn't calling anything. That tells me that I don't need this base onDisconnected code because it goes essentially nowhere. So then I'm going to do print disconnected from server for reason, and I'm going to do cause dot toString. And if I just do disconnect cause period, I can see what types there are, and then you could probably handle them accordingly. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and test this out. I'm going to go back to Unity. Just going to go into my scene view. It doesn't really matter though. I'm going to click console. Got some warnings. Don't care. Hitting clear. And then I went ahead and played my project where it says connecting to server. Connected to server. So it seems to be working. That means my app ID is accepted and the Photon is set up properly. I'm going to go ahead and close out of play, clear my logs here, and then go back to my project folder. Now I'm going to get started on setting up the settings inside an actual manager of types so they're not like hard-coded in the scripts. And for that, I think I'm going to use a scriptable object singleton. You might have strong opinions about singletons, maybe not. I think they have their uses as long as you don't abuse them, so that's a technique I'm going to be using in the next video.